We start. My name is Ellen Shiner from First Parish in Bedford, and we'd like to welcome you to the Bedford Lyceum. Today, we are going to hear a presentation by Rebecca Neal called "You're Not Going to Believe What Happened in Turkmenistan." Before we start, I wanted to just give a couple of tips to people and let them know, first of all, that our Lyceum presentations are all recorded. So if you wish to review them later, they'll also be made available on YouTube and available through Bedford Cable TV. Because it is a recording, during our Q&A, if you do not want your comments included in the final recording that goes to YouTube, please contact me at the email address listed on your screen, which is mountainbreeze52@gmail.com by 6 p.m. tonight, so that the party editing the recording can respect your wishes. And a preview, we have a couple of Lyceum presentations lined up already. In February, I still have to find someone to present, but Larry Hertz, our Zoom tech today, has volunteered, thank you, to present on March 6th. And Larry, can you unmute yourself and just tell us what you plan to talk about at that time?
Circadian rhythms.
Wonderful. And then in May, we have a presentation by Corinne Dowd et al. About divestment strategies to fight climate change. All of our presentations this year are from 3 to 4 p.m. And we welcome suggestions for future speakers and topics at all times. Again, you can use my email address for that kind of message. And at this time, I'd like to introduce our speaker, who is going to talk to us, as I said, about Turkmenistan. Rebecca Neal, from our own First Parish here in Bedford, grew up going to First Parish. And after leaving Bedford for college, she lived in Turkmenistan, California, and New York before returning to start her own law firm right here on Great Road. She helps families with their wills and trusts, that is estate planning, and helps people navigate divorce. She was a community health educator in the Peace Corps and in California. So with that, I'd like to welcome Rebecca. And if you can, I think, Larry, would you be able to show her as the speaker now, or is that just my screen that has that?
That's okay. Once I start talking, it might.
Oh, there you go.
Show up.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. As soon as I start talking, my cat wants to join me, so forgive me for this interruption if she interrupts us. But yeah, Ellen, thank you for that introduction. Here she is. I grew up in Bedford. I went off to college. I went off to the Peace Corps, following in my parents' footsteps. They were, my dad was a Peace Corps volunteer in Panama. And then he worked for the Peace Corps in Venezuela. And my mother was also in Venezuela for those 4 years. So it was kind of a no-brainer that I would go off to the Peace Corps. It was not a no-brainer that I would go to Turkmenistan. So yeah, I was surprised. So I apologize if you attended this presentation 20 years ago when I returned, because I did do a presentation for First Parish at that time. So I hope to add a little something new. I have some more pictures and some more information. At that time, it was a little more fun because we could be together, but hopefully this will be just as good, but in a different way. So I'm going to share my screen so you don't have to look at my cat who's going to step on my keyboard. And we can start. If you have any questions along the way, feel free to put them in the chat. And now she's stuck to my, okay. Feel free to put them in the chat and we will be sure to get to them. I won't be able to read the chat while I have my screen sharing. Okay. All right. So funny story about my cat. Her name is Jilly Boo. Her name was from a children's book. And as I'm talking to her, because, you know, people talk to cats, I'm telling her she's crazy, right? Because she does crazy things. And my Peace Corps experience comes out and I just start calling her Jilly because where I lived in Uzbek, Jilly means crazy. So little did I know that I had named my cat You're Crazy, because Boo means you. So Jilly Boo is translated to You're Crazy, which seems appropriate, but I didn't know it at the time. So here is the prototypical Peace Corps picture, me walking down the street with a bunch of kids. This is in Turkmenistan. When you apply for the Peace Corps, you tell them when you want to leave, what you want to do, and where you want to go. And they say, well, we can give you about 2 out of those 3 things. And I told them I wanted to do community health. And I said, yeah, I'd love to go to Asia. Well, they sent me my assignment in Turkmenistan, and it came with a flyer that basically said, what is Turkmenistan? Because who knew what's Turkmenistan? So you may know Turkmenistan, you may not. Here's where it is on the globe. So it's firmly in Central Asia, and this is the Central Asia region. It shares a border with Iran, Afghanistan, and Uzbekistan, and Kazakhstan in the very top there, and the Caspian Sea. So it is part of the Stans. So Stan is Persian derivative for land of. So that's why these regions are named Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan. So this is a Central Asian region, and this is basically, Turkmenistan is in the light purple, where it's located. And so, you know, what was I going to do except say, yes, okay, here we go on an adventure. Let's see, you might know Turkmenistan by the Bukhara carpet. This is a very famous carpet design. Or you might know Turkmenistan from a John Oliver bit 2 years ago, which was hilarious and sad at the same time, because Turkmenistan, it's a very unique place with a very unique person in charge. And so if you have some interest and want a laugh and a little bit of a cry, I encourage you to go check out this bit. It's pretty good. Brief history of Turkmenistan. Okay, it's been inhabited for a very long time. The ancient city of Merv was a city in 300 BC until approximately 1800 AD. It is in the middle of the Silk Road. It had been raided by Genghis Khan and his sons throughout history. It's right in the middle of what people know of as the Great Game, which is essentially, there's been a power struggle there for centuries. Who's going to control this region? That's really hard to get their hands around politically. And if you're interested in a really great book about the region, talking about this time frame, there's a book by Peter Hopkirk called The Great Game, and it's full of spy stories and all sorts of great information about how that region developed. before before the Russians annexed it, colonized it. And it's got a lot of great stories, terrifying and amazing stories. The Russians annexed it in 1881, and shortly thereafter turned it into a Soviet republic. My date on there is wrong, I believe. Maybe that's when it was actually turned into a actual union, a Soviet. But they did take over the capital city in 1918, I believe. And I think that from my experience in Turkmenistan, that is the turning point of how Turkmenistan came to be modern Turkmenistan, is because it was Soviet. And when the news was full of the Afghanistan evacuation and the United States pulling out of Afghanistan this summer, and people started talking about Afghanistan again, essentially, I saw a lot of similarities between the two countries, but the most enormous difference is that Afghanistan has never been colonized by a developed nation, or, it was never, the British tried to colonize it. The Soviets tried to take it over. They never succeeded. And because of that, Afghanistan and Turkmenistan diverged significantly on their cultural paths. Okay. So it was a Soviet republic for almost 100 years. And then when the USSR dissolved, someone, Saparmurat Niyazov, who was basically the party boss in the Communist Party for Turkmenistan, became president and declared himself president for life, which was true because in 2006 he died, and he died as president. And then the next president to take over was Gurbanguly, and I am going to butcher his name, so I'm just going to leave it at that. The current president of Turkmenistan. He's been president since 2007. He used to be Niyazov's dentist, and then Niyazov made him Minister of Health, and then the rest is history. Now he's in charge. So this is a country rich in natural gas, and this is one of the crazy things that happened in Turkmenistan. At some point, when it was part of the USSR, it's not known exactly what happened because mistakes and accidents are kept secret. There was some sort of mining or drilling or some sort of attempt at accessing some of the rich natural gas reserves in Turkmenistan. This is in the middle of the desert, literally in the middle of the desert. And they hit a gas pocket and believed that, and again, this is speculation because there's no true account of what happened or the decisions that were made, but it is told that they decided to light it on fire because they felt that it would burn off the gas. Unfortunately, this has been burning for decades. The gas pocket has never been burnt out. So I haven't seen it in person. Again, it's in the middle of the desert. There's no reason to go there unless you're going from the main city to where I actually did my training, which is about a 10 to 12 hour ride through the desert. And if you can fly there, you want to fly. So I never got to see this in person. So this is the currency there. The highest denomination is a 20,000 manat, which is the equivalent of 90 cents. Our living stipend was $60 a month. And we were paid, some people were paid in coins because they just do not make they don't make higher denominations of manat because they didn't, the president didn't want to admit that inflation was so rampant. He's going to need higher denominations, and so they never made them. And so that's him on the money. That's him with gray hair. Now, he had gray hair, and at one point he had a heart attack. And in order to instill confidence in his leadership, he dyed his hair black and said that the heart attack gave him back his youth and vigor and made his hair turn black again. And Niyazov had a significant cult of personality in Turkmenistan. His picture was everywhere, not just in government offices. You would see it on the sides of buildings. And so when he dyed his hair, he told everybody they had to get new pictures. And he tried to get rid of all of the pictures of him with white hair so that everybody would forget that at one point he had white hair. And in fact, this is the only time on the money is when I saw pictures of him with white hair. And folks who couldn't afford to buy a new picture just colored in his hair. That's what they did at my health clinic where I worked. So he called himself the father of all Turkmen, the Turkmenbashi. He erected statues, sorry, that's the lawyer in me coming out. He erected statues throughout the country to him. These are the most prominent ones. So what we have here is this tower is called the Arch of Neutrality. And it's Niyazov is the person in gold at the top. And he rotates with the sun so that he will look like he's holding up the sun throughout the day. Next to that, you can see the backside of a bull holding up the earth. And you can see a little gold something on the top, while the gold something is Niyazov as a child. It depicts the earth being shaken in an earthquake where his parents perished in the earthquake. And the golden sun, Niyazov, he survived. So that's a little taste of what the downtown capital was like with Turkmenbashi. This is the view from the Arch of Neutrality. You see some nice government buildings out there on the left with the domes. On the outside, they look like they have marble and they look really fancy. And on the inside, they are not. They look pretty bare on the inside. I'm not sure they even have different stories on the inside. So a lot of the government offices in Ashgabat had these kind of veneers of opulence and prosperity. But when you scratch the surface, you find that people continued to be in destitute poverty. So on March 1st, 1961 is when the Peace Corps was created. The first Peace Corps group went to Ghana. And there are all of these countries throughout the world that are served by the Peace Corps. It's a little out of date because there's no Peace Corps Turkmenistan anymore, unfortunately. Oh, the bright colors are current Peace Corps. The lavender colors is former Peace Corps countries. So I was in one of the last groups to serve in Turkmenistan. I was also only in the 9th group. This is a group of the volunteers I arrived with, plus the instructors at our training. This is like the second day being in Turkmenistan. I arrived with, I think, 54 volunteers. You arrive not knowing a word of the language. It's changed a lot since the program in Ghana in 1961, and I'm sure my dad can chime in about all the differences between my experience and his experience in the 60s in Peace Corps. So this was 1999, and we arrived at the training center, and we were there for less than a week. While there, we learned basic Turkmen. We learned basic health issues that we needed to keep track of. We learned about basic customs we should be aware of. And then we were sent off to our training sites where we would actually learn the language. And we were there for 3 months. I was posted in southern Turkmenistan because I was a volunteer in the maternal and child health field. And that's where all the maternal and child health volunteers would be trained. So we'd be trained in the language, and we'd also be trained in maternal and child health, because we were all like, most of us were just out of college. We honestly like didn't know anything about what we were about to teach. So we thought, we get to training and we learn, well, the first thing people need to learn about is germs. So we were somewhat prepared for that. And little did I know that my Peace Corps experience would prepare me so much for the COVID epidemic. Because what we learned at training was you gotta wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands all the time. We also learned how to identify various types of intestinal problems, because if you don't wash your hands, that's what's gonna happen. And so we were sent off, all 54 of us, to our different sites. By the time we ended Peace Corps, I think about 9 of us had gone home early. It was a really tough assignment, and there were a lot of challenges about living in Turkmenistan. This is the town I trained in. This is just a picture of the street. There really wasn't anything else to take a picture of there in terms of like, what did the town look like? This is a sidewalk in the middle of the street, and a woman brushing the dirt. This is my host family eating the traditional dish of pilaf. The Turkmen's national dish. If you were served a plate of pilaf, you were an honored guest. They ate on the floor. The Turkmen are nomadic culture, and you see that come out all the time in their current culture. They still eat on the floor, or they sit on the floor and have like a little raised coffee table that they eat off of. Plov itself just speaks to their nomadic roots. You know, it's stuff you can pack up and take with you. They don't really have herbs and spices. The word for it tastes good is sweet in Turkmen. The word for this doesn't taste good is spicy in Turkmen. So you could either say spicy or I don't like the taste of this. You use the same word. So the only things they really seasoned their food with was fat, meat fat, onions, carrots, salt, and oil. I think I listed oil twice here. That's on purpose. There's a lot of oil in this food, okay? And you can see there's some delicious pomegranates there. They have pomegranates everywhere in Turkmenistan, so delicious. And it was hard to learn to love plov, but eventually I learned to love it because of all that oil. So this is Turkmen bread. They call it naan. That's the Turkmen word for bread. And here's my host mother making it. She stamps it with something that has like nails sticking out of it, and it creates a pattern on it. It's a risen dough. And after it rises, she cooks it in the tamdur, which is that igloo-shaped oven with smoke coming out of it in the other picture. So they build a fire at the bottom, unless it's a gas tamdur. They take the bread and they spritz the inside of the tamdur with some water, and they stick the bread on the side of the oven. So it just sits there. And when it's done, it falls down. So that's the Turkmen bread. Just a few more pictures. As a former Soviet republic, this was the only mosque I ever saw, the only like modern mosque. I only knew one person who prayed. So although they were culturally Muslim, I didn't see any religious expression, except for my host father, who would pray at sundown. And then here's a picture of the bazaar, the market. So then I went up to my permanent site in Dashagus, which is northern Turkmenistan. I wish I could point and you could see it, but that big old hole of flaming gas. If you were to draw a line from Ashgabat to Dashogus and put your finger in the middle, that's where that hole is. So there's one road that goes from Ashgabat to Dashogus, and it's somewhere along that road. Again, if you could fly, you would, because these distances are pretty far. So I went from Marie to Dashogus, and this is what they told me about my site. They gave me these two pictures. They said, this is the bazaar there, and this is your house of health, your Sagluk Oi, where you're going to work. And every commune, every Koholtz had a Sagluk Oi, and there were a bunch of nurses and a few doctors there, and they would provide health services to people. Now that bazaar picture, I don't even know where they took that, because this is what they told me, and that's like the saddest looking bazaar picture. But this is what I found. Okay, in Kona Ergench, which is where I was, it is an old city. This is the remnants of an old city, with these amazing ruins. And so I would get like other Peace Corps volunteers come visit me, which is fun, because they wanted to see, this is like one of the only tourist sites in the country. Tourists don't come to Turkmenistan. It's really hard to get a visa. They don't come. But my friends, they would come visit because they wanted to see one of the only sites in Turkmenistan. And this is what I found. This is the bazaar that I knew. It's full of colorful fruit, and people there are very nice. For the most part, I never had a bad experience at the local bazaar. And we'd go like a few times a week. We'd walk to the bazaar about probably a mile. And this was in winter. The weather there was just like here. 30 degrees in the winter. Oh, but in the summer it was 95. This was my host family in the house I lived in. It had 4 rooms. It was one of the bigger houses made of clay. It was standing outside the kitchen, which is outside the main house. And you can see my house in the background of this photo. You can see the kitchen is in white, and the rest of the house has like a wooden top. And we were right next to a school, and this was essentially the playground, some old broken down construction vehicle where the kids would play when school got out. So for a little background about Kona Ergench, where I was, just take a look at this map of Turkmenistan. The red shows folks who are Turkmen, who have Turkmen ethnic origins, okay? And you can see that, okay, so where there's color, there's people. Where there's white, there's no people, all right? So the very middle of this country is desert. So you can see that there's Turkmen all along the west and the south and the southeast. Now, when we get up to northern Turkmenistan, there's so much going on there. Okay, and that's where I was assigned. So I focused in on it so you can see. So what you've got going on is, you can find on the map to the right, that's Kona Ergench. It's right on the border with Uzbekistan. And this border is kind of meaningless. It's meaningful because they're part of Turkmenistan. But when you look at the map of, culture and ethnic origins, you've got folks who are Karakalpak, you've got Kazakh, Turkmen, Uzbek. There's a whole mishmash there. And guess what? All my Turkmen language training really, I needed to go back to school, because when I got up there, they spoke something else. They spoke kind of Turkmen, kind of Uzbek. But it was really just something very particular to the region. And so even though they gave us a Turkmen English dictionary that somebody wrote at some point, it was like printed on, like printer paper and bound at home or something. It was like it was a good attempt at a Turkmen English dictionary, I didn't have an Uzbek English dictionary. I didn't have what we would call a Turkmencha dictionary. We would call it a mix of Uzbek and Turkmen. I didn't have that dictionary, but thankfully my host sister was really wonderful and she helped me through it. But I also think that that made my host city a very interesting place to live. I had a friend there who was Caricom Canal, a friend who was Kazakh, and I lived with the host family that was Uzbek, and I had originally been assigned a family that was Turkmen. And I had been assigned a host country national who was kept trying to speak Russian to me. I don't speak Russian. So like I said, it's a tough assignment in Turkmenistan. The hardest job you'll ever love. That's the Peace Corps motto. And I believed that until I became a mom. But for those of us who don't become moms, I guess it's the toughest job you'll ever love. Okay, so this is I'm just gonna go through quickly some of the cool sites in Kona Ergench. We've got a 12th century mausoleum. This one's my favorite. It's not preserved at all, and this is what it still looks like. Nobody has done anything to preserve this place. Same with these places. I mean, you can just tell nobody's done anything, but they're still standing. This is a hill called Kirk Mulla Hill, 40 mullahs. Kirk is 40. And it used to be an old fortress. It now has people buried inside. And the local superstition is if you roll down the hill with a wish, your wish will come true. Or maybe this was a fertility thing. I'm not quite sure. But, my Uzbek was not awesome all the time. Right as I got more accustomed to the language and I really started understanding, that is when we got evacuated. It was like the worst timing. So Peace Corps is really hard in a place like this at the turn of the century when, email was not widely used. We didn't have access to phones. I didn't have a phone in my house. I had to go to the phone station and pay them an exorbitant amount of money while they gawked at me being like, you want to call where? And then I would basically just say to my parents in the 3 minutes that I had, hey, call me at this number in 20 minutes. And then I'd go haul ass over to, my friend's house who had a phone, and hopefully my parents would be able to get through. Even though folks were emailing in 1999 and 2000, oh no, this was 2000, right? Even though they were emailing in 2000, internet was not accessed in Turkmenistan. This is a dictatorship with state news. They really cracked down on internet use and people were not able to access it. It was really hard to get internet. So yeah, it was a tough assignment. I forgot where I started with that, but it's a tough place to be. The culture is very different. It's very communal. So if you want any time alone, you really got to work hard to communicate like, hey, can I just go in my room and just have some time alone? Yeah. So these are two of my friends on top of Kirk Mulla Hill. And then this is a friend of a local friend who's rolling down the hill. So when the Soviets came into colonized the country, and then, when the Russians colonized the country, and then the Soviets took over and started breaking things up and putting them into communes and forcing nomads to settle down, they drew lines. They drew political lines. And so these are the political lines that they drew. They sectioned off Turkmenistan and said, you're Turkmenistan, you're Uzbekistan. We don't care that we're just cutting through on these different places that doesn't quite make sense. They just kind of cut through I don't even know why they cut through that way. Okay, so if you'll see, I had mentioned the Bukhara Rug. And if you'll see on this map, it says Bukhara there. That's in Uzbekistan, but yet the Bukhara Rug has what's called a Teke Gul. The Teke tribe is a Turkmen tribe. A gul is the flower, the pattern, and this is a distinct Turkmen tribe's pattern. And so the reason why it's known as a Bukhara Rug is because people would travel to Bukhara, which is an ancient Silk Road city, to trade their carpets that they've made. But now it seems it's interesting because when I hear Bukhara, I think Uzbekistan. When I see this rug, I think Turkmenistan. And the rug behind me is one that I bought in Turkmenistan, but it's very unique. It's not one that I've seen in Turkmenistan. I think it's from southern Turkmenistan or northern Afghanistan. But the typical Turkmen rug is this design, the Teke Gul, as they call it. So when they divided up when they colonized and when they made the nomads settle into communes, they built a lot of infrastructure. Okay, the Soviets also forced these nomads to become farmers. They built something called a Caricom Canal. So Caricom is the desert, but it's also known as the Caricom Desert, meaning black sand. Caricom, black sand. And so it's a black sand canal. It is, how many miles long? I didn't put bullet points on here because I hate bullet points, but I have them in my notes. This was probably one of the most impactful projects that they did in the entire region. Yes, they built roads connecting cities. Yes, they built telephone wires eventually and gas connections and electricity. This had the most devastating environmental impact on the region. It's an 854-mile canal through the desert to allow for the production of cotton, exclusively cotton. And so I'm bringing up this map again because you can see this dotted line on southern Turkmenistan. That dotted line is the canal. All right, so you can see it goes pretty far. And I also wanted to show just a little bit of what that looks like in real life. So here's Ashgabat. All right, this is the capital. The canal goes here, okay? And it here's the lake, the reservoir for it. And it allows for all of this farmland to exist, all right? But let's see how far it goes. And this is just made me just kind of, I mean, when you can see, so there's Ashgabat. And we're still going. Okay. This here is called the Amu Darya River, the river of love. Darya is river. And the canal goes from here all the way through essentially the desert to Ashgabat with a few reservoirs along the way. And the purpose was this: to farm cotton, exclusively cotton, which is a really terrible monocrop. I forget what they call it. But when you exclusively grow cotton, it is a very harsh thing on the environment. You use a lot of pesticides, a lot of fertilizers. It requires a lot of water. And so that caused a lot of environmental damage. And I had prepared for more time. So I'm just gonna, I don't know if you want to hear more about my life on the commune. This is my life on the commune, or if you want to hear more about the devastation it caused. It's kind of depressing, but this is me. People ask if I had running water. I had running water if I walked really quickly while I was holding it. This is our shower in the summer on the right side. Otherwise, we would just bathe in a bucket in the closet. But the picture on the right side is my host sister emptying a bucket of water up to a bucket on top of their shower, our summer shower. And then on the left is me washing my laundry, doing my laundry. And this is my host mother in the summer. She has an amazing garden. She's enjoying some lunch. And we jarred tomatoes, had a blast. And here's some kids that were picking cotton. And on the other side, we have my friends' children who are all dressed up in matching outfits to go to school on the first day of school. But the school was closed the first day because cotton picking season had begun. And it was time to send the kids out to the fields to pick cotton. So they closed school for the first 2 weeks, then 2 more weeks while they go out and they pick cotton for the state. And this is in a country, whoa, my cat. And this is in a country with rich natural resources selling gas to international companies. Do they really need to be growing cotton and conscripting their residents in order to do so, and getting children, forcing children to do that to the detriment of their education? It's pretty heartbreaking to see how the education system in Turkmenistan was such a failure. Okay, and then we decided to do something fun. We decided to take a vacation, 1-day trip to see something that we'd heard about. These old rusted out boats, fishing boats, on what used to be the edge of the Aral Sea. And so Moynok is a former fishing village. It's in Uzbekistan. The Caricom Canal drained the Amudari River, and the Amudarya was the one that fed the Aral Sea. Okay. We heard there's no longer a seashore there. We wanted to go check it out. We obviously didn't have enough depressing things to think about, but we figured, you know, we got to go see this thing. We've heard so much about it. It's so close. It's within a day's drive. This is my friend on the former shore of the Aral Sea. And there's still signs there for, like, you know, come see the nice view of the sea. And we were like, whoa, I see somebody, you know, with their sheep out to pasture. So it's a short drive, you know, it took us like 3 hours or so. What you see on the 2 photographs on the left is the Aral Sea as it used to be, and on the right is the Aral Sea now. And so I have something. So this is, this shows us what happened to the Aral Sea after the canal was built. So we start in 1960. See if it'll start again. Yeah, 1960. And then eventually it gets drained so much. This is 2000, that's when we saw it. That's what it looks like in 2014. Now, if you notice in 1960, there was an island in the middle. So if this isn't depressing enough, there was an island in the middle. It's called Bozrozdenya Island. It was a place that the Soviets would use to test bioweapons. And back in 1971, weaponized smallpox got out somehow, killed a few people. They had to vaccinate entire villages like immediately so that the smallpox wouldn't get any further. And so what happened when the Soviet Union disbanded and this became Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan's problem? Well, it was discovered that anthrax had been dumped there. And thankfully, in 2002, 10 anthrax dumping sites were decontaminated. I don't know what else might be there. But the truth is, with all of the bioweapons testing, with the pesticides and fertilizers seeping into the river, the Amudarya that fed the Aral Sea. Now the Aral Sea has receded, has dried up. It caused all this dry riverbeds, this dry seabed, and these vicious winds to come through, and it makes these toxic chemicals travel through the air. And so folks in Moynock and other border cities are dealing with severe cases of lung disease and anemia and TB. So when we arrived with our taxi driver who'd never been there before, he was like, why do you want to go there? And I get it. Why would we want to go see this? We were like, where are the boats? Where are the rusted boats? And so he asked around, and turns out you take a left at the TB clinic and keep driving, and this is what you'll see. And these are just two of the boats that I took pictures of. Just, you know, as they stood in the water, as the water receded, they just got abandoned. Very depressing. Uzbekistan has just left the Aral Sea problem to be a problem. Kazakhstan has tried to resuscitate the area, and they are having some success, which is good to know. And so, yeah, you're not going to believe what happened in Turkmenistan. And then 9/11 hit, and I had been there for a year, exactly a year, and we were all evacuated. The evacuation took about a week because, if you remember, there were a lot of unknowns about what we were going to do, about what was going on, and they wound up evacuating the entire region, all of the stands. You know, Turkmenistan didn't seem like a very dangerous, it didn't seem like a very dangerous place in terms of terrorism or violence. It's dangerous because it's like people are in poverty, there's disease, there's like accidents, and walking alone as a woman, you don't always feel safe. But I really didn't feel unsafe. I just wouldn't walk around at night. I mean, I don't do that here either. Yeah, they still felt that they needed to evacuate the region. And so I came home, Peace Corps worker home, not happy. This succinctly summed up how I felt at the moment. The state-run TV said 2 planes had crashed into each other over the towers. They did not want to tell anybody about terrorism, but because I lived where I live, they had Uzbek TV, and the Uzbek TV station told the truth. Well, I mean, I don't know how much truth, but they definitely were able to communicate the ins and outs of the actual situation. And I didn't have a phone at my house. So I went into town and I called Peace Corps, and I was like, so I heard that something bad happened. And they were like, yeah, you're going to have to go pack up a backpack with some warm clothes and some good sneakers and go to this other volunteer's house. And then we'll let you know when we're going to come pick you up with a Marine helicopter. And we were like, oh, yeah, that's okay. So then I went over to my friend's house, like 2 or 3 hours away, stayed there for a few days. And then they said, well, you can actually go back and get your stuff and then come on into the main city, Ashgabat. And so that's what I did. But in the time that I was gone, my host family told me that neighbors and the mayor came by all to offer their condolences and see what they could do to help. The mayor offered to have a telephone line installed at my house, which is really kind of them. So, I mean, I could talk about this for hours and I won't. So I'll just leave it at that. If we have any time for any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Yeah. There's always more to talk about. But if anyone has questions, you could type them in the chat or you could raise your hand. I hope I gave you a good picture of how upside down it is in Turkmenistan. It's just, the way I think of it is a bit like, well, I don't know. I don't know if I've conveyed adequately how much of the Twilight Zone it seemed like it was, with a dictator and, tightly controlled media and lack of access to information. But on the flip side, hopefully I conveyed some of my pictures of my host families, just how wonderful people were to me. And some of the things that have continued, they're not religious folks. They have a Muslim background and culture. And some of the things that continued, along with washing hands before meals, was their hospitality and how wonderful they were to welcome guests in their home. And really, like, how amazing it was that they welcomed me. I didn't know anything about anything. They must have thought I was really dumb. There's a lot of stuff I didn't know.
Well, thank you so much, Rebecca. It's been fascinating and firsthand experience. It's been a while, but I doubt things have changed very much there.
I don't think so. When I was there, we were told that there had been 3 cases of HIV in the country ever, which, we're sure is a lie. I have no idea what COVID looks like in Turkmenistan, but I'm sure they're not reporting it. To answer some of the questions, this rug is not a Bukhara rug. I don't really know what it is. It's something so unique. I felt like I had to get it. I got it on that last day right before we flew out of the country at the last minute. And I don't keep in touch with my host family. It was so hard to keep in touch with them. They don't speak any English. I'm really terrible with Turkmen at this point, or Turkmencha, as I used to call it, or Uzbekcha, I used to call it. Anyway. And then someone asked, do people see any hope for their future? And you know what? They don't. The conversations I had with people, life is what it is, and they just make the best of it. They don't have elections. They don't really have any say in anything that goes on in the larger sphere of things. If you are to challenge the government, you probably be sent to some sort of mental hospital or prison. And I never, ever once got the impression from someone that they thought anything, that their circumstances could change in that regard. Really apathetic. But that is to say also that, doesn't mean that they didn't have, find ways to find joy and happiness in their lives.
Thank you so much. We can open it now to the Q&A session, part of the session. And as Larry said earlier, if you can type any questions you have in the chat, I know there are a few more, or indicate through the participants tool that you want to raise your hand, or just wave madly, and Larry and I can help go through the list of people, and you can unmute at that point. So Larry, do you see anybody in the participant list with their hand up? Okay, so let's look at the chat first. There are a couple of other questions.
We have Rick Rosen. Rick, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, Rick.
Hi, Rebecca. The country, by the way, that was fascinating. I wasn't sure what to expect, but that was really wonderful. The country borders on the Caspian Sea, which would seem to be a source of, well, I don't know, fish or natural resources in some way. Has the country taken advantage of that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's like their crowning jewel, the Caspian Sea. Mm-hmm. It's actually really beautiful there. And that is where a lot of the drilling happens for natural gas. because well, I don't know the status of a pipeline through the Caspian Sea or not right now, but you know, I think they had hopes for that at the time. I don't know the status of it, but yes, that area definitely had a richness of resources that wasn't present in other parts of the country. It was a stark difference.
I was a little bit surprised when you showed your population map that there weren't more people along that coast or more cities or towns.
Right, I know. I mean, well, so there just aren't a lot of people in Turkmenistan, and the truth of the matter is, the Soviets used to send people there in exile. They used to exile people there, and when the Soviet Union disbanded, the people who were exiled there left. So there's that as well. And it's the folks with the cultural ties and the family history there who have stayed.
Well, thank you again. It's fascinating.
Sure, of course.
Craig Jackson has his hand up.
I was going to say, you said there was not particular religion, but what were the celebrations like, weddings,
Yeah.
etc.?
So, okay, so we definitely had, well, they practiced Ramadan and Eid. So they would fast during the day in Ramadan, and then Eid was like fun, you know, going around to other people's houses at sundown and guesting and enjoying food from people's homes and things like that. They celebrated spring, Novruz, and that was celebrated by making something. I don't know I forget how we ate it, but I did not like the taste, so I didn't eat it very much. But like, they cook something in this huge cauldron for like 3 days. And I actually, I don't know what this has to do with what, but there's something about jumping and swinging with Novruz where like you're supposed to be, and they break out these enormous swings that people get on and start swinging around on them. They look really dangerous, but you know, people are enjoying themselves and they see no problem with it. Weddings are, you know, an entire day long affair of going around to different places and taking photographs at the different like monuments in town, and then going, and then having a big open air reception. The bride is unhappy the whole time because she's leaving her home, and she's going to a new home. And the reality for that bride is that she's about to go to a new home where she's going to do everything for everybody for like the next 2 or 3 years and be expected to raise, you know, babies. And so I would be sad too, if that were my fate as a new bride. And for the rest of her life, she'll be treated as a bride until, well, the trick is, of course, to marry the oldest son. And hopefully he has younger sons, because if you marry the oldest son, then when the younger son takes on a new bride, then you get to leave the house and start your own home. So if you marry the youngest son in a family, that's like your fate for the rest of your life, is to maintain that household with your mother-in-law and father-in-law. You can imagine. So yeah, those are celebrations. Funerals. Ooh, I saw one funeral. It was only men. And they all gathered. There were more people there than I've seen in my entire time in Turkmenistan, all gathered in a field to mourn the person who had passed. And then the women stood on the sidelines, like far away, and they just started like wailing and screaming. It was quite a sight.
Someone asked in the chat what guesting is.
Yeah, that's my dad. He knows what guesting is. So I probably said it. It's just going to somebody's home to see them, and they make a huge deal out of it. They make you a huge meal, and they try their best to be good hosts for you. And basically, if you wanted to see a friend and spend time with them, you would take that friend and go to somebody else's house. Because when you go to somebody's house, they're going to show you how much they want you there by going into the kitchen and cooking you a huge meal, and you never get to see them and chat with them. I learned that too late. I learned that trick too late. But that's guesting.
Rich is waving.
Hi, Rebecca.
Hi.
Rebecca, if you needed, for instance, to seek medical or dental care, did you have an option?
Oh God. So as a Peace Corps volunteer, we could contact the capital city for emergency medical needs, for routine I did go see a dentist in the capital that Peace Corps provided me with. If you needed something significant done, they would send you to Thailand. So it's kind of like, shoot, I wish I needed a crown, but I didn't. Unfortunately, at one point I sprained my ankle, but I was so far away from the capital city that they couldn't get me crutches for 2 weeks. And by then my ankle had already healed and there weren't any crutches in town. They were just like, just stay in bed. I was like, what? You know, and the outhouse was like 50 feet away. It was an experience. Medical care, they sent us with like a little medical kit. I made sure to get some Cipro and antibiotics in my own medical kit because I was so far away from the capital. I couldn't just go get antibiotics from them. But yeah, for folks who lived there was medical care available to the best that could be provided, but that wasn't super great. My host sister had an abscess in her tooth. They had to pull the teeth. When I sprained my ankle, I did get an x-ray. That was an experience. I got an x-ray in town at the hospital. Super unsafe, I'm sure. That person probably has radiation poisoning by now, the radiation tech. And it was like this ancient machine from, Soviet times. Medical care there is free. You get what you pay for, though. You have to bring your own needle if you want a clean one.
Oh.
But vaccinations are up to date because they have support from, international aid places. Like my House of Health, I showed a picture. They had a big freezer with vaccinations when they would do a vaccination program. So that was helpful. That was good.
So there are a couple of other comments in the chat. Can you explain what your job entailed? This is from Carol Apple.
Oh. Yeah, I was a health education volunteer. So I was supposed to educate them about basic things that would keep them healthy. So my first job was to assess what they needed in their community for health education. My second job was to help dispense with that, right? Now it's a 2-year role. I only got 1 year there because of the evacuation. And so I was just getting my hands around what kind of projects I could do to provide community health education. So when I first got there, I was still relearning a new language. And I mostly went around with different nurses to different houses, learning about what challenges people had. Medically, there was dehydration from intestinal illnesses with a child that's really, really dangerous. They had already prioritized working on that, but I thought maybe I could do something to help in that regard at some point. I made some educational posters and I talked to them about, medical stuff in the United States. And I worked with the nurses on like educating them about how best practices when things came up. But yeah, that's part of the Peace Corps, is your job is so amorphous. You're out there to do maternal and child health, but you're also out there to kind of represent the United States and put on a good face for them. And you're also there to, when you come back, educate people about what the country's like that you visited. So there's the 3 goals of Peace Corps. And the 3rd goal is what I'm doing now, telling you all about Turkmenistan. I forget which one's first and which one's second, but one of them is educating them just about the United States and like things that they might want to know. And then, a third of that is actually doing the actual job, which I do feel like I didn't really get around to doing. But at the same time, I was looking through my pictures this morning, and I have a picture of me and 2 of my friends brushing our teeth. And that's a picture that my host sister took of us because she thought it was hilarious. I had 2 friends come and stay with me, 2 other Peace Corps volunteers, and she just thought it was the funniest thing to see us all brushing our teeth at night. And like, just that activity is a what they call a learning moment, that's how we keep our teeth like this. When she got her abscess, I had no idea what was going on. She was like, what do I do? I was like, let me look at my book, and why? Well, here we were, the Peace Corps volunteers were all brushing their teeth at night, so that was kind of my job, like a kind of sideways education.
I had a question.
Mm-hmm.
What is their philosophy, or did you witness in gift giving? Because they don't really have much. But for example, in the former Soviet Republic of Georgia, if you expressed that you liked something, you couldn't leave the house without it, without insulting someone. And I was just curious about that and men and women's interaction and how that was appropriate.
Well, if you do go out and guest and you visit somebody, you do bring something with you, usually like crackers or cookies or something like that. And they'll usually put it right out on the table. But so it's not something that they would keep for later. I think I would bring stuff like little American flags and scented candles and stuff. They would like them, but I never really saw people giving gifts, to be honest with you. But the way that they show appreciation for each other is with food. It's with food and showing how much they appreciate you. Like, they have this dish called Monty, which is a pot sticker, and they put meat in it, but there's also a version that they put squash in. And someone was like, I want to have you over my house. What's your favorite dish? And I said, squash Monty. And she said, oh, I can't feed you squash. Like, there's no way, I got to feed you meat. That's a shame on me if I don't feed you like clove or something with meat in it. But that's how they show appreciation for somebody. As for the gender differences, I got there and I was like, whoa, these are all women at the House of Health. There's no men working here. These are all nurses and doctors. This is so progressive. The truth of the matter is the women were working in those jobs, but of course they came home to the second shift. And they were also holding up their homes at home. Now, the home I lived in, the dad was working as in construction, and the mom did not work. So sometimes you had those roles, but at all times you had a woman doing all the housework. And never did men cook or put food on the table or clean or take care of the kids. One point, my host's dad came back. He traveled. He wasn't home a lot. He was off-site on construction jobs. He came home to visit. It was so lovely, and we were sitting at the table and he says to me, go get me tea. And I was like, nobody had told me to go get them anything at any point. I was a little taken aback because I'm thinking like, this is your house, you know, this isn't my house. And but yeah, I always kind of felt bad for the male volunteers because they would be stuck at the table with all the men, and all the women would be volunteers, would be back in the kitchen having a great time with the women, like cooking and just like kind of having a blast at the parties. That's where all the fun would happen, really, honestly. So I thought it was kind of boring at the table.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else that you see, Larry? I see a few more comments in the chat. Okay. Karen asked, how does your experience affect your current view of current politics?
Oh, wow. So, yeah, I mean, when Trump came in was president, I was just thinking back to my experience under a dictator and state-run media and thinking, thank God for our media. When I was living in Turkmenistan, there wasn't a day that I didn't wake up thinking about how lucky I was to be born in the United States. Just sheer luck that I was born in the United States and I wasn't born into a country that was so impoverished and a life that was so hard. But yeah, that experience of seeing all the apathy, political apathy, because they just could not change their situation beyond their personal life, absolutely makes me feel like a patriot, like makes me feel really grateful to be here and exercise all of my democratic rights, because God forbid we ever slide down that road. How did my PC experience change me? My mom is asking in the chat, how did my Peace Corps experience change me? After peace, so before I went into the Peace Corps, I traveled across the country with one of my friends, and we spent the night in like different places every single night. Like we went to campgrounds and hostels and stuff, and we were like freewheeling, and it was fun. When I got back from the Peace Corps, I wanted to be nowhere except home. I was done. I was done sleeping anywhere except my own bed. I became a homebody. I felt like I had enough adventure and insecurity and instability for a long time. That's one way that it really changed me. And, you know, I appreciated Bedford. I was like, well, this is a nice, stable place to be.
Thank you very much. Any last questions? We'll have to close, but wanted to give some people room. Let's see. I'm looking for hands waving in case anybody didn't come through on the chat.
Diane Marston.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Rebecca. I knew of this way back, you know, you were a part of the church, but this even before you started today, I went and looked up the country and where it's located, but this is really helpful, really educational, and thank you so much.
You're welcome. My pleasure. This is what you get when you ask me to talk about Turkmenistan. I've been talking for an hour and a half, so.
Well, thank you. Before we leave, let me just share my screen one more time. I just wanted to thank Larry and Paul Bradford, who was our backup. Larry took the helm, and Bob Bass will be uploading this recording to YouTube. Again, just a reminder, if you do not want your comments from the Q&A included, please contact me. But otherwise, I want to thank Rebecca again, sincerely, and have yourself a wonderful afternoon and evening, everyone. Stay safe.
Bye, thanks for coming.
Rebecca, if you want to stay on.